The October 10th, 2023 board work session is now in order. Roll call, please. Paul?
Mr. Susan?
Here.
Miss Wright?
Here.
Miss Campbell?
Here.
Miss Jenkins?
Here.
Mr. Trent?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is a public hearing and rule development for Board Policy 2417, Comprehensive Health Education. Is there anyone present who wishes to address this item? Is there anyone present who wishes to address this item? All right. Open floor for anybody, board members wish to discuss this? All right.
I think, Ms. Campbell, the last meeting when we originally workshopped this, you had asked this question in regards to our health curriculum being submitted to the state and approved, and I'm not sure, has that been approved yet? I know you had mentioned that the elementary portion of this wouldn't come until, I think, May, I believe is what you said, but the secondary,
That is correct, and so we did submit it by the deadline to the DOE.
okay.
Turn it on, turn it on.
Shout. We submitted it. I don't have it in front of me, but I think the deadline was September 29th to submit to the state. Something interesting as a result of that was the feedback from the DOE was, has this been board approved? So we shared that the new state law says that it has to be state approved prior to going for board approval. And their response was, has it been board approved before? If it has, it'll probably be state approved, but you need to get it board approved. So that's where we are with that. So we have not heard back from the state yet, but we are very concerned because we're progressing, to the end of the first grading period.
Right.
So we really do need those materials to be state approved to follow the law. But that's where we are with the state.
Okay.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Did we make changes, or is it the same material that we approved last year?
We actually did make changes based on some feedback from someone that came and spoke one night at, so one of the resources that we were using for a dating violence lesson, that resource had some other lessons in there. We were not using them, but if you go to the one resource, those were available. So we have gone with another resource for that piece. So we did pull that. I believe the resource was called One Love.
Oh, yes. Can I make a suggestion? I don't know if it's possibly that we can approve it pending state approval, so they have some kind of half and half, and we all get there at the same time?
Is that allowable, Paul? I don't know, I guess if
Sounds like the DOE is confused.
I honestly think they might be understaffed as well.
And my guess is they don't have the personnel to get through every district's material. I think the board could certainly do that, given the direction that staff's received from the DOE. So if the board makes a motion to approve pending state approval, as the DOE's advised, then I think the board would be okay.
We can write that up on the agenda item, correct? when
Right,
it comes-
because, put it on there that DOE advised us to get it board approved prior to state approval, and that way it's clear that the board's acting on DOE advice.
Okay.
okay.
Good? Everybody else okay? Thank you, Paul. Good. All right. Moving on.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Last public hearing is rule development for Board Policy 5460, graduation requirements. Is there anyone here who wishes to address this item? Is there anyone here who wishes to address this item? Nobody seeing none? Anybody as a board member wish to speak to the meeting dates? Ms. Campbell, you had some concerns. Somebody had mentioned you may have some concerns on the meeting dates,
On the meeting dates, I thought we were on.
graduation requirements.
That's,
Those are
Oh,
different.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, wrong one. Anybody have any questions on the graduation requirements? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Next topic is the Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services. I think we have a presentation here by Ms. Bias.
yeah,
Ms. Bias,
Mr.
you have
Chair,
the
just
floor.
to remind everybody in the audience that may not be aware, and refresh the memory of the board, is we presented some CCEIS data a month or so ago, a couple months ago, and that data was all broken down by ethnic subgroup, and that's how it's reported to us by the state. That's typically one of the areas that you could be cited for if your different subgroups have a higher likelihood of being suspended versus others. And so the board asked to look at this data from a couple different lenses. So the presentation today is about that same CCEIS data from the lens of a subgroup of students with disabilities. So that's the data that staff is going to share with us today. And they're going to see some positive uses of the data and how we can use the data to inform some of our decisions. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Dampier and Dr. Bias. They're going to lead us through the presentation.
Good afternoon, board members. Today, Dr. Baez will provide an overview of the data that was requested. We did a presentation on August 22nd. I want to remind everyone this is lagging data. This is 2-year-old data. And so you asked for some, updated data, and this data is lagging as well. It's not going to be a comprehensive current data like we will see when we do an updated on academics as well as discipline coming up sometime this month. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Baez and I'll jump in as needed.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the time to go a little bit deeper into the conversation with our CCEIS group. So as Ms. Dampier said, this is lag data, and based on that 2021-22 data, that is how our district has been designated as CCEIS. So it's 2 years old, but as far as then the plan that was submitted to the DOE for CCEIS and an action plan, it's based on the 22-23 students with disabilities. So we can see 2 different years, the 2021 and the 21-22, where we were over the 3. Which is indicated as like the red zone, and 3 times more likely that that particular subgroup had disciplinary action taken. And for our CCEIS, as a reminder, it's out of school suspension more than 10 days. So looking ahead already with our last year data, we can see that we're already in the green and out of the red for the same subgroup. So the data that we're going to talk about today is based on the 22-23 students with disabilities and for our African American subgroup. And we're at 2.58, but again, we have 101 students that we're going to dive into a little bit deeper today. First thing we'll take a look at is the 101 students. Here's the breakup of the students by disability. And what you'll probably notice right off the bat is about 55 students, more than half, are students with disabilities for specific learning disabilities. The other quarter would be other health impaired, and then the other quarter is comprised of our students with emotional behavioral disabilities, intellectual disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, and developmental delays. So that pie chart kind of represents then the students from the subgroup that we determined for our plan, 101. So this right here kind of breaks down definitions for all 6 of those subgroups there. And it's important to keep in mind that all our students are general education students first. And what this kind of signifies is something individual that our students need on top of. And so it's very specific in our responsibility that we want to tear down or break down those barriers that are impeding progress and impeding learning. So for our students with disabilities and specific learning disabilities, those students have some difficulty processing information. It may impact listening, speaking, reading, writing, math, even spelling. And for our students, it could be mild or moderate. So it could be 30 minutes a week that we're working to support a goal that has been identified and individualized for them, or it could be 300 minutes a week. That's important. Then we're looking at the strategies and accommodations that help level that playing field for them and align those so that we're using our informed data-driven decisions to see what's working, what's not working. For example, a student may be needing text-to-speech, so they may be a sixth grade student, but reading on a second grade level, and we're assessing comprehension at that point. So we're looking at just different ways that we can break down that barrier so that they can have immersive reader or snap and read, and then it's doing a text-to-speech and reading it, so we're actually assessing comprehension and not the reading as the barrier. Additional time, repeated directions, visuals, and just the way we present information can help our students with specific learning disabilities.
Can I ask a question real fast, just to hop in here as you're going through this? So some of these definitions here are definitely doctor diagnosis, but some of them look like they may not be. So is this a range? Are we diagnosing some of these children, or are these all coming to us with a diagnosis from a doctor?
So for specific learning disabilities, that is not a diagnosis from a doctor. When we get to other health impaired, there may be a diagnosis there from a doctor.
So our staff is doing the analysis then at that point, is that correct? Okay, just trying to have a full understanding of it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, can I just jump in just in case? And I might be misinterpreting your understanding of that, but I just want to make it clear. So our educational institution doesn't diagnose, period. So we will do assessments for things like ADD and ASD, but they become an educational diagnosis. So that diagnosis cannot be used out in the medical community, even though it has the same label or identifying name. For the OHI, if a parent comes in with a medical doctor diagnosis, that's used for their IEP or 504 or whatever services they may need. But we are never doing the assessment to identify a medical diagnosis ever.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that was just kind of my question going, okay, like some of these, like the SLD and then the EBD, I'm like, those don't look like they're coming, that could be us that's doing the evaluation. That's why I was just trying to understand.
Yeah,
better
and
on
it's
that.
super confusing for families, especially when it comes to ASD, because often the first place that a parent is told that that might be going on with their child is in the school. And so then they go through this process with their school and they get confused because they think that their child has then been successfully identified, but they can't go use that to get medical services outside in the community. They're going to have to go through that process outside of school. So it's a little bit confusing. So sometimes you'll have students that maybe necessarily are labeled in the medical world with ASD, but their struggles aren't as significant in the school system, and they'll actually fall under a different one like SLD or something else, or OHI versus ASD. It's complicated, but I just want to make that clear. We do not do medical diagnoses.
All right, thank you. It definitely can be very complicated. So other health impaired can be a chronic or acute health condition that adversely affects educational performance. And so that example could be the asthma, ADD, ADHD, Tourette's syndrome, heart condition. And so again, that can also be mild to moderate, and you're looking for the impact on the educational environment, and then what we can do to mitigate those factors that are the barriers to their learning. For emotional behavioral disabilities, that's a student with consistent emotional or behavioral response that's negatively impacting, again, their educational environment. And so students would have a functional behavioral assessment, and we're identifying then what is the function of the behavior, and then identifying what interventions we want to put in place to, again, help remedy that and align that with their behavior plan. We could also have some social emotional goals that are very specific and target at those coping mechanisms and just some opportunities to regulate emotions in a variety of settings. Our intellectual disabilities, those are our students with the most significant cognitive impairments, and it can be affecting two areas of function. That's intellectual function, which is going to be our learning, problem solving, and judgment, and then also adaptive functioning, so looking at daily life skills, and then communication and also independent living. As far as the individual or the intellectual disabilities, that can start very early and as far as deficits in the developmental period. And it's also, I wanted to add here that as far as the federal target, it's not to exceed 1% of then the alternate assessment. And so we're right at that mark, but we're still below the state for 1%. So it's measuring then participation in ELA, math, science, as far as the alternate assessment, the FSAA. But I thought that was important here for our intellectual disabilities. The next one up is our autism spectrum disorder, and this one has quite a wide range. So we're looking at atypical development that varies from one student to another with a pattern of impairment, and it could be in their social interaction, communication, or some repetitive and or stereotype patterns, and sometimes that can be for students flapping and stemming. But we have other students, and they don't exhibit those behaviors, and they just have some brilliant minds. And those students would then be in our ASD. The last one I'll talk about is developmental delay, and this one is for students ages 3 to 5. And it can be any of these categories as far as adaptive, self-help, cognitive communication, social emotional development, or even physical development. And this one, legislation changed last year. It used to be they would be developmental delays until 6, and then you're looking to see if there's any other supports that are needed, but now it's been extended to age 9 or the completion of 2nd grade. So a student who has a developmental delay can continue in that up to age 9 or completion of 2nd grade.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
Sorry, again, I really want to understand fully. So could you have a child potentially labeled with more than one of these?
Yes.
So then how does that compare when you're looking at your data that you're breaking out the 101 students? So if you have a child that's got 3 of these on there, how do you rank them? Where do they fall?
So primary disability. So
Okay.
the students, the 101 and the breakup on the pie chart before, they could have SLD and they could also have language impaired or
Right.
speech. So they could have multiple, but it was based on the primary
Okay.
disability.
And again, just to understand, so that is established by us at BPS. So, okay. All right.
And just follow-up question, these 101 students, is that pre-K through 12 or K through 12, or what age? Do you
So
know?
they were all K to 12.
K to 12, okay.
Yep. I had to think if there's one pre-K, K to 12.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so this next one is a continuum of service. And what I love about this is the label does not define the placement. So really it comes down to what a student needs. They may have SLD, and it may be that the least restrictive environment is where we can support them, and that would be in a regular class placement, 80% more of the school day with non-disabled peers. They may have more needs than that, and then it's a resource setting, and that would be our 40 to 79%. It could also be a separate class placement. So this kind of graphic really does exemplify the fact that it's not driven by a label, it's driven by need and individual needs at that. So the IEP team, they'll develop an IEP, and then the last thing that they would do is say, all right, where can this IEP be implemented, and what would be the most appropriate to match where the student needs are. I did want to add on this one, I looked up our annual performance for Brevard, and we're meeting all targets in every one of those categories. Before I talked about discipline, identification, and placement, that's what they monitor for CCEIS. And while we're discipline related in the CCEIS, the placement we're doing quite well. The target for regular class placement is 77.69, that's a state target, and we're at 80.39 for regular class placement. For the self-contained setting, less than 13.35%, and we are at 11.25 in our self-contained separate class placement. And then they also measure separate day school, and that's the target is less than 3.23, and we're at 1.83.
Can I
So-
ask a follow-up question about that?
Sure.
Those numbers you just read, is that for overall, for all of our ESC students, or specifically to this subgroup that we're talking
For all.
about? Okay.
And are those percentages at all driven by capacity issues that we might have as far as the separate day school or things of that nature?
No.
No? Okay.
And are those numbers comparative to other districts in a database somewhere where they have like Seminole, Indian River, and all of those? Kind of
So
like they do
the-
for all of the other ones?
The
Okay.
annual performance report comes out, and they have, actually, it's on the DOE site that you
Yeah.
get all of them.
Right, it's the same place you get the CAF, or same place you get all that from those. I just wanted to make sure there was a place you could go compare them, so thank you.
I think your mic is on.
It's probably a good thing.
All right, so the next few slides will focus on our 101 students. So we looked at grade level, and, again, this is last year. The students in this category, 101 is last year's data. And the majority is in our secondary, our middle and high. And I think we have at least 70% right there coming from those categories. We have some elementary, and I have 2 that were withdrawn, but the majority are in secondary for the 101 students. We looked at homeless, whether or not that was a factor here, and we had 100 students that it was a no, and 1 out of the 101. We also looked at free and reduced lunch. We had 96 on free and reduced, and then 5 who were not. We looked at previous retention. This one you don't have on your slides, but I added under construction. We were in here yesterday, we were having a conversation. I was looking at this again, and it said 81 no, and then 20 yes. And so my next slide made me think, and then going back into focus, we have to dive a little deeper because there may have been something in the transference of AS400 to focus that we need to dive a little deeper. But right now we have 81 not retained and 20 who are, but I need to go back on that one. So this one is the first available statewide assessment that we could find. Because all our students are at different grade levels, as we saw in the previous slide, it may not be the 3rd grade one, it could have been the 6th or 7th grade. So it was the first available one we had, and for 101, 92 of them scored a level 1 or 2. We had 6 that scored a 3 or above, and then no record was found on 3 of them. And here's the makeup again, same slide previously. The biggest takeaway I have on this one is for the 67 that we did have for 3rd grade, 93% of those students were level 1, 2. And I think that's significant because if we look at the research there, we talk about 1 in 6, if they're not reading on 3rd grade level, will not graduate on time with their cohort. And 23% will end up dropping out or not finishing altogether. So that 3rd grade one is significant for a number of reasons, and so 93% at this point in time of the 67 out of 101 had a score of a level 1 or 2. All right, so we're going to go a little bit deeper on the 44 high school students and see how they're doing and whether or not they're on track for graduating. And so we were able to obtain for the high school ELA 2 graduate requirement in grades 10 through 12, 3 were proficient and 29 scored a level 1, 2. Of the 3, those are on alternate assessment, so that you have that knowledge there. And then Algebra 1 EOC, we had 4 proficient level 3, but we have 35 score level 1, 2. The difference in those numbers is Algebra 1 EOC can be taken before the 10th through 12th, but we were able to determine then the scores for those grade levels there. Current enrollment of our 44, we found 35 actively enrolled, and they can be in a variety of settings there, and then 9 were inactive. So then I went back and I'm like, well, where are the inactive? 2 did graduate. 2 transferred in state to another public school, 2 transferred out of state to another public school, 2 are not enrolled, and then 1 actually just showed back up yesterday. So it's moving data. So out of all of that, we have 74%, I calculated 26 out of 35, not on track with their graduating class, that cohort. So we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the high school. This one right here, looking at the 101, do they have current behavior plans, and do they have current social, emotional, and behavior goals? And so the majority there, well, we've got 2/3 have both. And I think that's super important because, again, we're talking about how we can support students to mitigate any barriers that are either, related to a manifestation or related to, again, whatever is causing them a outcome in the discipline realm. Going back then and looking at before the out-of-school suspension happened in the 10 days, did they have the behavior plan? Did they have a social-emotional goal? What's really interesting in this one is we had 25 less here that didn't have either one at the time. But then it started, again, any data you're continuing to dive deep, it's like, could it have been something that was an automatic, maybe 10-day pending, and we didn't have a chance to even put in a behavior plan or put in a social emotional goal? That could potentially happen. So then we dug a little bit deeper into the 25, and I was kind of looking and thinking maybe it was related to drugs or weapons or something along those lines, and that was not the case. It's pretty scattered with the 25 to go and try and figure out then why 25 did not. All right, next one up. This one is whether or not they were here for their entirety, and out of the 101, 75% of them did start in Brevard, either in pre-K or kindergarten. So we just have a few there, 24 out of the 101 that entered second grade and beyond. So thinking about CCEIS and the plan, we do have 6 schools. I identified that last time. And we did have a training already on September 19th with those 6 schools and their identified group that they wanted to bring. And we did focus on functional behavior assessments, and we did focus on behavior plans. Because while we know the 101 at this moment in time, we also want to look at those early warning systems. And so looking at, students that may be having difficulty, ensuring that we have the opportunities and supports and aligned and interventions for students that may be rising. So we did both on that day on September 19th. But it really is all about the problem-solving piece of that. That's tier 2, tier 3, but not losing sight of our tier 1 supports, which are district-wide and, again, available using our data sources that we have in focus. We have a lot of different trainings that really hit the mark on supporting our schools and our teachers, and very popular. So the Behavior Intervention Toolbox, we started last year. They actually walk away with a toolbox of items and how to use those within a classroom setting. We added visual supports because in walking classrooms last year and supporting some of our ESE teachers, realizing going back in the beginning, visual supports is probably a huge one right now for our SLD kiddos in needing those levels of support so that it's not a confusion on what's being expected. We have that training added. We have communication. And then new this year through Fiddler's Discretionary Project, we have disability awareness training. We do have that built into the 4 days of PD pathways. So any new teacher that comes into Brevard, we build that into the summer, into the fall, and into the spring. And it's one of the 4 days where we go over disability awareness all day long on that one. But you can see key elements, which is all related to behavior. And then we have another day on policies, procedures, and behavior management, and then also specially designed instruction. So that one's we run those on summer, like I said, and then we did Saturdays 4 times during the, that's coming up in, did we do that in the, one of them is gonna be a Thursday. We switched it. We always were doing Saturdays, but then we get the feedback and it's like, well, I can't always do Saturdays, so we switch it to like Thursdays. And then also this is the FBA and BIP training that Lauren Deuce is doing with Mr. Reed and the MTSS framework and behavior. So lots of great PD. So it's coming at all different angles and supporting the needs that are out there. And we do a lot of follow-up with the training as well to see the implementation of that PD to practice.
All right. Any board members have anything else to add? Okay.
Thank you for that. So I have a couple of things here. This is obviously something that I care deeply about. I brought it up in December. We're here 10 months later, taking a deeper dive into the data that not only myself, but community members have presented over and over and over again. And so I'm glad that we're here having this conversation. Dr. Rendell, you obviously were not a part of it at that time, so this is no shade on you. I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I'm gonna say a couple things, and then I'm gonna ask questions that you probably don't have the answers to right now, but I think it's important for us to get those answers, and I want my fellow board members to hear them so that when they get them in an email or whatever, they know where it's coming from. So what I want to know is the numbers of students with disabilities and the label that they're given, so SLD, ASD, EBD. The numbers that you presented were for that one subgroup, for our Black students. Is that proportionate to their same age white peers? And the reason I'm asking is because it's a general understanding when you're in the ESC world, you can't really ignore it with your eyes, that so many of our Black students are identified with different labels than compared to their white peers. And so I would like to see that on paper proven to me, rather than just an assumption. But what I mean by that is there are way less Black students identified as ASD typically than their white peers. And that's typically because of an unconscious or conscious bias against those students, as well as a heightened number of Black students get identified as EBD than compared to their white peers. And why that matters is because traditionally those labels are happening really early in their educational career. And when you're labeling a student a certain way because of a bias, that is basically creating their trajectory for the rest of their educational career. And we need to be aware of that if it's happening. So I would like to see the numbers on that. And I apologize, I know you don't have that here. Again, this was data on students who had OSS for more than 10 days. So I don't know, it would be easier for you to disseminate it that way, or if you can just do holistically for me too, whatever one is easier for you to break apart.
So I was just going to say, for CCEIS, they do 4 categories, and it is for identification. So we do not have any disproportionate identification in any areas for any of our races at this moment in time. So I do have that information. I didn't bring it with me today.
So the screen that starts off by saying we were red flagged for over 3, is that what that's showing us?
No, that one was for discipline only. That's the only category that we're in CCEIS for 10 days out of school suspension or more.
Okay, so let me say this differently. We may not be red flagged by the state for it, but I still would like to see the numbers. Because for instance, like the discipline one, we're not red flagged anymore, but it's still way different than their white peers. So I would still like to see the numbers. Just because we're not being red flagged doesn't mean that it's still the best thing for our students, and I think we need to know about it. As well as for placement, I'm curious about as well. So not just label. I'm really excited that they extended DD to 2nd grade, because anyone with an early childhood development expertise would agree that that makes sense. You can't just catch up within a year or two, so I appreciate that. And I think that would help some of the concern I have about my previous question, because often in the pre-K world, we had Black students or Hispanic students labeled as DD, and when they transition into kindergarten, they'd get labeled something for a bias and carry that through their entire educational career. So it gives more time for that student to catch up, to acclimate, to have more adults on them before that label is either transferred or hopefully removed. The one thing that we didn't talk about too was another concern of mine is the disproportionate, I already asked you this, so you're gonna get it to us more specifically, but the disproportionality between placement when it comes to our Black students in ALCs and our Black students in EBD classrooms. Again, you can't walk into those spaces and not see it for your own eyes. And it's a really negative reflection for this district, but again, I said this back in December, it is not to put blame on the people who are sitting here right now, but we also can't see it and ignore it. So when we have almost 50% of our students in our ALC of a minority population, that should be a concern to us when demographically they're doing the same offenses as their same age white peers. So we need to take a look at that. When we get that information, I want to say this one more time. I know we're specifically looking at students with disabilities because we're talking to the two of you, but again, as a district, we need to take a hard look systemically of what's happening here, because Brevard Public Schools we are above the state. We have a wider gap in ELA and math gaps between Black and white peers across the board, not just in the area of students with disabilities. So I'm really glad we're talking about this. I hope that this conversation goes a little bit further, and I hope we actually put a plan in place to do something about it, like our community has been begging us to do over and over again, because we are here to do everything that's best for all of our kids. And when we elevate one of them, we elevate all of them. And the conversation about pre-K towards the end, it was a conversation that I had with Dr. Rendell, and I think it might have been Ms. Hatton, I'm not sure. When we're talking about just brainstorming choice options and things of that nature, one of the things that I believe is really, really important when we look at our students that have attended pre-K for BPS, traditionally they're doing a lot better. So if we can offer more of those opportunities to some of our students in those areas where they aren't having those needs met, it would be awesome. All right, thanks. Sorry, I know I threw a lot of questions at you guys, but it's important, and I love that we're being transparent and putting it out there because it's the first step.
I wanted to piggyback off something that you said. We're not just looking at the discipline data for students with disabilities. We're also looking at it all students, because we want to look at all the subgroups, not just students with disabilities, so we can put a plan in place on how we can fix it.
Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, I've just got a few things. Thank you. I wanted to just clarify to make sure I understood. On the 101 students, the slide says students with disabilities with more than 10 days of out-of-school suspension. Is this also specifically our Black population in that category? Okay, just wanted to make sure. That label wasn't on there. Can I get back to what you said about the IND and make sure I understand that rule? So it's a federal rule that less than 1% of our students are using the alternative assessment. Am I understanding
More
that
than
correctly?
1%.
And then if it's not, and you said we're right at it.
I think we're at 1.1 in ELA.
Okay.
Maybe 1.2
Seems like such
in
a scary
science.
thing. I know it's red flagging because I want to make sure we're doing it right, but it seems like a scary thing to put a artificial limit. You shall have no more than this many. I mean, because we have the students that come to us, and we're not going to kick one student out of the program because we got another one in. So it kind of bothers me that we have those artificial limits on that. But that is federal, right? Okay.
The state is monitoring that for all districts.
Right. I just, related to the ALCs, I just wanted to point out one thing, because we can look at it, but the actual population of ALCs is not the most accurate way of determining that, because families have choices. It would be more, when you talk about placement and discipline, it would be more accurate to look at who is getting expelled or getting that in lieu of expulsion, because who's there is more a determination of who picked ALC because they didn't want to take another option of trying to find a private school or doing virtual school or just not doing anything for the time being. So I think we need to back it up before they get there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Trapp? Ms. Wright?
Okay. All right. Thank you for taking this dive into this. I know I was asking questions, and I appreciate you looking into, because honestly, I think an accurate diagnosis is how we figure out how we move forward and make things better. So I appreciate that. I'm still getting hung up, and again, some of these things that are on number 4, page 4 of the slides, these are medical diagnoses, and that's why I'm like, I'm concerned. I guess I have questions about how we're able to, at the district level, not give a diagnosis, but treat as though I guess I'm still very gray in that area. I don't understand how that happens. So potentially some of our staff could go and say, hey, this child has ADD. That's a medical diagnosis. Is that what you're saying, or no?
No. They
No.
would bring in a medical diagnosis. We do not diagnose.
Even teachers, no one does.
So
Okay.
they would bring that in, and then the team would look at that and see if it's impacting them in an educational environment. Because in some cases, people can have ADD and it's not impacting
Right.
their educational environment. So then you're going through and you're looking at all those items that we can support in that, and is it truly something that they need? Do they need, it could be a 504 as well, and not
Right.
necessarily an IEP
Right.
of other health impaired, so.
So then we're not, and that's where I guess I'm just keep on going back to this going, oh my gosh, is that something that we're doing? Because
We do not.
some of these things are very much medical diagnosis. Some of them, well, actually, all of them are really a medical diagnosis of some sort. So
For the other health impaired.
yeah,
I'll tell you
absolutely.
a story to maybe illustrate how it works, and that is that we were dealing with, a child who was having struggles in academic areas and went through all the testing process and including our psychologists who are psychologists who go through the screeners and all of that. And what was chosen to put on the IEP is autism spectrum disorder, right? So then you go to the primary care physician, who's the one who can help with the diagnosis, and say, hey, do we need to go outside? They say, well, what's going to be the difference? Because they're working on the symptoms, whether it's ASD or ODD or whatever label they give it. What the schools are doing is they're working on the academic symptoms. If the child needs more time, the child has comprehension issues, or the child needs to work on group speech, where they work on the proper responses to social circumstances. I can't remember the technical term for that. But, all of those things, those are the things. There is a label that's given, but it doesn't mean, but every student who has that label is not getting the same services. It just provides an umbrella. But a parent can go outside of that and go get a diagnosis, or they can walk in with one. But even if they walk in with one, it's still going to be the same process of the schools and the parents and the teachers, and our support staff trying to figure out what are the symptoms, right, and what are the supports we can give for that student.
Can a parent refuse to say that they don't accept this, as far as they can say no to that?
Yeah.
Okay, and does that happen on a do you guys run across that or no?
It has happened, but I couldn't tell you. I mean, I feel it's a
Okay.
rarity, but I probably would be speaking out of turn.
Okay.
Can I give you one more clarifying thought too? So those categories, SLD, ASD, all of that, they all have qualifiers. And so a lot of times students will exhibit difficulties in school, or they'll be on a certain assessment that they were taking qualifies them for that category versus another category. And or it's faster to go into one category than it is to go into another. And sometimes those routes are chosen to give the student the services they need faster, because the label doesn't matter, because the services are reflected on that IEP, and that's really what matters. So sometimes you'll have a kid labeled with a language impairment, because doing the assessments, the speech language pathologist can do that assessment really, really fast, but they may have autism spectrum disorder. They may have a medical diagnosis of it at some point, whatever, but they choose this path because it's faster. Whatever's on that IEP really is what matters, the content within it. And just for your awareness too, there's a procedural safeguard packet that goes out to parents when they have an initial meeting. It's super thick. Sometimes we joke about wallpapering your bathroom with it, because you get it every single meeting. Legally, you're required to get it. And the main point of that is to say, you as a parent have a right to refuse any assessment. You have the right to revoke it at any point. And you're in charge of the whole thing, and you have to legally be invited to every single meeting about your child when it comes to that IEP.
Yeah.
It is very confusing though. I've always argued, being in the ESE world, please change the names, because it's confusing for instructional staff, but it's confusing for the parents, quite frankly.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I know I had a lot of questions about this one, so I appreciate the detail that you've given on this presentation. There's a lot of valuable information here that we can look at how we do things better moving forward, so I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. I just wanted to say thank you. I think we can cut data and look at it different ways. And just like Ms. Campbell brought up, there's issues that may be underlying factors as to those reasons. But I wanted to take a second to each one of you and say thank you. We are significantly upgrading our facilities, trying to get individuals the pay that they need so that we can have the support inside the classrooms to reduce some of the behaviors. Money for each one of the IEPs that we have, the students that have that revenue that comes in because they're identified at different levels, getting those taken care of. You have gone above and beyond, Ms. Dampierre, to create a system where not only are we holding students accountable, but also getting them the resources and fighting to do that. And I wanted to say thank you. I think it was Ms. Wright that led the challenge to go out to Gardendale, get us out there. Was that you? Ms. Jenkins? Ms. Jenkins, give Ms. Jenkins the credit for that, because we all went out there and we saw kind of what you guys have been dealing with, right? Like, we're trying to create facilities. We're trying to do all that stuff. We're trying to get the staff. We're trying to do, and you're doing it at warp speed. So I wanted to take a second and say thank you. I want to say thank you for all of your work. Thank you for the hard work that you guys have been doing. You know, we can look at some of those things, which is absolutely we need to look at those because we don't want to ever have biases. But at the same time, I think that I just wanted to take a second to say thank you because I'm really proud of the way Dr. Rendell's taken the reins and started getting moving in this direction. And I'm really proud that Ms. Jenkins actually brought that up to make us go to it. So I just wanted to take a second. That's all. You guys have anything you want to say as closing argument?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, kind of
That's it.
bring it back forward, so thank you.
Dr. Rendell, you feel like you got what Ms. Jenkins was requesting and everybody else?
Yeah, I do want to make a couple comments. When I first saw the data that they were presenting, one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that this same group of kids is facing significant challenges early on in their educational career.
Yep.
And we can put interventions in place and we can train our staff in the upper grades to how to react. But an investment in these children at an early age would really pay big dividends. So when we're talking about priorities and stuff like that, this is an area that if we invest early in primary education, it's going to help us in these things that sometimes we don't think investing in that time of a student's life is going to. But these numbers would be different if we could get to them earlier.
Right.
So, when we say, how are we going to try and fix this or address this? One of the things is, attacking, putting more resources at the early years, because it was kind of like, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, like what happens first, but obviously if they were more successful, as Dr. Bias mentioned, by third grade, then they're going to be more successful later on. So that's when I looked at all the data, I know what we're doing, trying to help our teachers have tools in a toolkit and all that kind of thing, but if we could do more early on, that'll pay dividends. So when we get into the spring and we're talking about priorities for next year and stuff like that, that's, just remember that when we.
And I think also utilizing the supports of many of the resources inside the community the correct way, whereas a lot of them have been out there willing to help, but not aligned correctly, not all rowing in the same direction. I look forward to seeing that, Dr. Rendell, and we had spoken about this on the offsite and stuff
Right.
like that. So I look forward to that leadership, and I think we can all rally around that flag and get and go. So with that, I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody
And can I
else
just
have-
second
ma'am.
and third what Dr. Rendell just said? Okay, thank you.
All right.
Like, there's so many other little things that when that day comes, we should
Right,
all
right.
throw our oars in and go.
Yeah,
So thank you.
and I mean, never mind, it's the right thing to do, and we all have a heart
Sure.
and we want to do the right thing. It's also the fiscally responsible thing to do
Right.
because it actually ends up costing less money in the long run when
Yep.
you invest early. So it's absolutely the right choice.
All right, so with that, nobody else has any closing arguments or anything? We're good to go?
The legal team of Dampier and Bias are good to, they're good to go. They're good to go.
Statements, whatever you want to say. All right, next board policy is 2520, selection and adoption of the instructional materials. Does any board member wish to open the conversation to this? Anybody wish to have conversations wrapped around it?
Yeah.
I figure we're all going to kind of say something. I'm waiting for, oh, look who it is.
So do you want to start before we start with
I
our?
would love to start. Let her start.
All right.
Just pull it towards you. Just tap on it. Pull the little button. There's a button.
Okay, got it.
You can pull the whole
Maybe
thing.
that'll be the toughest thing
put
that
it
I
on
do
top
all
of my
day.
book all the time. Just put it on top of your book. But you can put it on your book like this.
She had it right.
You can go like this, Miss. You can do stuff.
I'll break out in song. Is this working though? Because I do have it on and I don't. I'm gonna just switch.
Be glad to give you mine.
Okay, how's this going? How's this going?
Sounds
Now
good
it's
to me.
operator error. This can't be. Third time will be the charm.
Here comes
This
Mike.
one.
If you hit
This
the-
one's not working.
like this,
No,
mine's not working.
that one's not on at all.
None of them are working.
No, yours is tapped. It's on.
Myself.
Yeah, I just heard it.
Turn them all off.
Turn them off.
Mic check 1, 2.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, we don't have, none of them are working. Yeah. We can't operate microphones. They
They're
are?
all working.
Oh, okay. Just
Thank
not
you.
over the speakers in here.
It's definitely working. You're right.
This doesn't work.
It's
As
not,
long as it's working in there. we're
if
okay.
it's working
All
in there,
Here
great.
we go.
I'll talk loud for you guys, and he says the microphone's
It's just
working.
not working
so.
out here.
Okay.
So we'll start with 2520.
That's classic.
And basically, just to overview the more minor changes, I guess, and by minor, I don't mean that they're insignificant, but just things that were just for clarification. You'll see items as clarifying that library collections or book collections, that does include classroom libraries. I think when this language came out, because I know you revised these policies in April of '23, but since then, the state was able to clarify that that includes classroom libraries. So you'll find that change in here. This also speaks to posting on the website so that parents have access to those for elementary instructional materials, but then any reading lists or library collections that parents would have access to. This also speaks to adding the language that aligns with 1069 that speaks to what the objection process is. So I think when you're thinking around 2520 with selection and adoption, we know that we have our process already as far as our adoption of where I can contest through that adoption process. But now this will bring on a parent can also limit access. So as a parent, I have a form that I can complete that says, I don't want my child reading this text, or I can limit access to books without saying I'm objecting those materials to my school library. So there's a limited access, and then we have the full-blown objection process that we can get into, and that is the process where a parent or a resident then would object to materials. Thinking around why I might object an instructional material or a book, and sometimes they're one and the same, but they're not always. But I feel that there is pornographic content. I may not think it is suited for the age group or the grade level of the student. So those are really aligning with that language of these are reasons I might object. I want to clarify when we talk about instructional material versus books being on a reading list or in a classroom library or in a media center. The reason I say sometimes they're one and the same, if I'm teaching and I say, okay, while I'm working with these students, Mrs. Jenkins, I want you to go select a book off of, I'm telling you, you're going to go get a book off that classroom library shelf, and you will be reading this. Then it kind of starts bleeding into instructional materials because I'm saying you will pick one of these books. Another time that instructional materials can look like books, but they're really part of an instructional material program is in some of our early grades, you may have a reading program that we adopt as a package, but it comes with leveled readers, or it comes with small group readers that help students build background knowledge around a topic. So the little book is not necessarily now the same as that classroom library. It's part of our instructional materials. When we adopt Benchmark Advance, teachers got books that will help support instruction. Those are instructional materials. The reason when we talk about the objection process that parents or residents have the right to, it depends on, is it a state-adopted material that we've adopted, about who is doing that process. So what we have, we're presenting today in 2520 is a limited access form, and that would go to the school. And so then as the school, they would say, okay, is this limiting access to a type of book that would go to my media specialist? And then our media specialist code that as this child has limited access towards this. It could also be, we have, in some cases, parents say, there is a poem in the book that my child is reading. I want my child to still work around that standard, so we have to instruct around that benchmark or standard, but they're just excusing themselves from that poem. But they're not saying I want it out of all books. It's just parent choice for them. So you'll see those are kind of the highlights of the overview. What I want to bring your attention to 2520, that is a change that you may see in 2521, is our old form for reconsideration of materials really fits with 2521 better. So you won't find it in 2520 because we've revised it and put it into 2521. The form you will see with 2520 is that limited access form. I kept, or I being the we, the whole team, currently in what we're putting in front of you today, we kept the procedures for objection in both 2520, but you will find them duplicated in 2521. And so that is past practice in Brevard. When you look at this policy that's come before you for revisions each time, that has stayed in both 2520 and 2521. So I want to make sure that that works for the board moving forward to maintain that. So we revised it to align with the new language, but that it is in both policies.
That was actually my question, because before it was in 2521, and then now I'm seeing it in both, and I was trying to figure out why. There's a lot of crossover, obviously.
There's a
The New
lot.
World Initiative reading initiative is in both. But I mean, as long as we're always, anytime we make tweaks, we keep them together and we always make the change. But I was curious because in the past, there was listed more in the current version of, there was for the state adopted textbooks, it was different. And I didn't see, some of that seemed like got taken out. Is that because of the
Some
current
of it
changes?
is a reflection of, so what you will find as far as that adoption process is that 20-day hearing window. So we recommend materials, it goes out 20 days before a public hearing. And then after that, we have that 30-day where people can contest at that point. So those
still there.
processes are still in
gotcha.
there.
Gotcha. No, I thank you, because that was the question I had was why we're doing it in both. I noticed that this was in both of these for the Neola recommendations, but both of them, when they get to the end, they have that section on the New World Reading Initiative. They have that last paragraph that talks about promotion of third graders that doesn't have anything to do with anything in the policy. And I actually thought first, like, oh, that looks like a typo. And then I went, nope, Neola did it too. What is the point of that?
I believe that it 1069 carries so much, but one of the things that that section does add is actually pre-K. So in the past, the New Worlds was K-5, and so it includes that pre-K, but I think it also I believe it is one more opportunity to say that with this new language around that third grade promotion, they're wanting it to be that it's not a one high stakes test determines that for students. And so I felt like that was in there and we do have, even in our proposed student progression plan, we had those other good cause exemptions of other pathways where students can get to fourth grade, but I felt like that was another way to articulate that, yes, you may score in the level 1 range on that PM3, but that there are other pathways to get to promotion. Or a good cause exemption. I think it was just another way to just solidify, of course, we want all students reading on grade level by third grade, but that one assessment would not determine that.
Right. Still doesn't seem to fit the New World's Reading Initiative, but I'll
doesn't.
take their,
It
take their
doesn't.
word for it.
Anybody else?
I had one clarifying question that I'm hoping Paul can possibly, because I've heard mixed things in the community. On page 29 of this, under section, letter N, it looks like you're citing it straight from statute right here, where it's talking about the parents having the right to read the passages from the material that's subject to the objection. There was some misconception that something had to already be in the objection process in order for, if that happens. So can you this to me says if it happens, even whether or not that material has been objected formally and gone through that process, it's still, if it's stopped, it's pulled. Is that correct?
So We were just talking about that earlier, because within, it does speak to parent, first of all. So that's why I'm glad you brought this up, because it's a parent up here. The other language always speaks to parent or resident, so this is parent. And then, Mr. Gibbs, it is my understanding that your recommendation is that because it says from any material that is subject to an objection, so we were under the understanding that that meant a prior objection. But
Mr. Gibbs, are you
we
still
would-
saying that?
Yeah, that's how I've advised everybody so far.
Have you consulted with other attorneys around the state? Because I'm hearing mixed things on this. So they're saying, no, it doesn't have to be in a formal objection process. If anybody gets up there, a parent gets up there and reads it, and it's not been objected, that book still would be pulled if somebody stops them immediately. And so,
Well, there's different interpretations. When you talk to different attorneys, there's a myriad of interpretations. Some are saying you can still apply your decorum right and rules. And if they violate it by reading, it doesn't have to be pulled because your policy rules apply. So I'm taking statutory language over all others, and the plain meaning to me is that if there's an objection that's been filed, now if they get up and say, I'm objecting to this, and when you read the DOE rules on appeals, the hearing officer is only supposed to be evaluating whether we followed our processes. So if that's what the appeal is, and our process is you need to file this form objecting to it, and the DOE now has also issued a form for objecting to materials, that's my interpretation is if they've objected to it. Now, if they come to the meeting, I have this form to file, who do I give it to? And I'm going to read this stuff. It could be an objection right then and right there. But I think they need to file an objection based on the plain language.
okay.
So this broadens it from what we talked about, a little bit more than what we had talked about before,
In what way?
in that, I think that's where Mr. Wright's getting into. It doesn't have to be one, before we were talking about one that's in the formal process.
Well, if they
It's in the
bring their
pipeline.
if they bring their form that night, they're putting it in the pipeline. So
But it still would be, if we should be able to have the right to verify that it's even a book that we have, or that's.
there's nothing that says that we get to check if it's a book. Now, that's an easy answer is we don't have that book in our libraries
Right.
if they're there. But
I'm just saying, somebody could get up there and start reading from 50 Shades of Grey, which we've never and will never have in our libraries, hopefully. But, you know, we don't have to let them read from 50 Shades of Grey just because they choose to come and do that. You may see where I'm going?
I get it.
Well, I
Hang
mean,
on,
this
Mr.
says.
Trent, Mr. Trent, can you
Sorry.
go ahead?
So whoever can answer this question, maybe it's you, Ms. Harris. What material is subject for an objection?
The picture described, it's right there.
I'm hoping you're saying materials that we have in our school. 'Cause
Correct.
A parent is not going to come, or citizen, and have an objection to material that's
Something
not
we
in
don't
our
have.
school. So I read that as
We had one
material
meeting
that is subject to an objection. It's not subject to an objection if we don't have it. So any material that we have is subject to an objection. It doesn't mean in the objection process, in my eyes.
Right.
I think what, and I might be misinterpreting what you're getting at, Mr. Trent, but I think what Ms. Campbell is trying to say is she is concerned about people coming up there and presenting it as if it is something that's in our schools and getting away with reading it aloud when, as the board, we have the authority to stop anything that is obscene.
And we should.
Yeah, so I think that's Ms. Campbell's concern.
I mean, we could always
How
stop
do we
it.
monitor whether or not it's appropriate to stop somebody? It makes it difficult.
Right. And yeah, I would agree. If it's not in our school system, then there's nothing for us to do. There's not even a reason to have a hearing on it. The question is, if you don't have it readily available to you to verify that, and it's public comment, you're not going to say, all right, give us 10 minutes to go verify.
No, that would be after the
Yeah.
fact. I'm assuming the
Yeah.
chair would not want inappropriate language if it's in our school or if it's not. And we
Right.
can always verify after the fact that, oh, yeah, this.
Yeah,
this
I
was-
would agree, but
this was from it.
for public comment purposes, we're not going to be able to sit up there
No.
and search every book that someone may get up and read.
Not in real time.
So I think, and how this could play out is, obviously, I think what you are discussing are the same things we've been discussing. If a parent comes up and is reading anything that is, filled with profanity, then as a board, you make that decision to, turn the mic off or, stop. It then becomes, if it's in our collection or like does it get removed? So I think two steps of your point is if they're up here just speaking, then you serve as board members, taking steps to reduce whatever they're saying that is potentially offensive. The next step is when does the book get removed if they are then asked to stop reading aloud? And I think that was the conversation. And so with Mr. Gibbs' recommendation is it would need to be in the process of it has been objected.
I have to vehemently, I disagree with that. This says right here, if they read passages from any material that is subject to an objection, every material is subject to an objection. It doesn't say for anybody that, or for a material that's in the process of an objection. It says for any material that's subject to an objection. So that's where I'm like, I just don't think, I'm concerned that we're gonna be violating the law if we,
We've had these exact same conversations, of clarity around.
is it possible to get clarity from the DOE's attorney and ask them what their interpretation of that would be, Mr. Gibbs?
They refer you back to your own counsel. That's all they do.
Ms. Wright, this is, I hear you on that, but like, that's the point of these intentionally broad laws, is because they want to pass the buck down to the school district to make those decisions and those very restrictive decisions so that they can't get blamed for it. And the way I read it is that someone has access to read it, not to come to a podium and read it out loud, right? So that's the problem with these broad laws, is they're gonna get interpreted 67 different ways across 67 different counties. And it puts us in a bind. I have a question though about the parent thing. Do we have a right to verify that? Like to access their information and verify that they have a student? Because we don't really technically, especially as board members, we have no right to student information just willy-nilly. I don't have a right to look up a kid just because I'm a board member. So does someone have the authority to do that, to verify that? And then my other question is, what if they come in, fill out the form anonymously? Then is it a non-issue because they refuse to identify that they're a parent?
Once they object to the materials and complete the objection form, then we do have the right to verify. Even with the state's template, it speaks to, is someone verifying, are they a resident? Are they a parent? So we would do that. Now, as for them being just up at a podium, that would be a gray area. I mean, it's very difficult at that point to know, am I just a community stakeholder that is coming up reading aloud? Or at that point, we can't confirm, are they a parent or
Well,
not?
now I'm confused because, not that I want there to be more liberty to ban things, but now I'm a little confused because when we were talking about it last time, it wasn't that the person who was reading it had to be the objector. So is that not the thing anymore? Like, I thought it had to be something that was objected to, and then anyone can read it, get stopped, and then it goes away. Can you clarify that for me, Mr. Gibbs?
I'd have to double check the language in the statute versus what's here.
Okay, because then they wouldn't, so my question, the reason I'm saying that is because then they wouldn't necessarily be filling out a form potentially.
So one, and I don't ever want to step into, your position, but one point I would like to make for N is the whole point of this section is to say that if a parent comes up and reads material that is pornographic and is silenced, the next steps could be, it says the district shall discontinue use of the material. So if I come up, to use the example of 50 Shades of Grey, if I come up and I'm reading that, you would use your process to have me stop reading that aloud. However, the next steps, this language is guiding the district on their next steps of this material. So it says the district shall discontinue use of the material. So that's the emphasis here, is what would our steps be based on?
And-
So
And
we can get clarification for Are they a
After.
current objector, or are they
Right.
objecting that day? Have they filled a form or not? But then our next steps in that process is that if it is objective material, or they have filled out the form, we work the process to discontinue use.
And there's a million things that we can stop the meeting or stop somebody from speaking to. Those are all different combinations. This is just saying that if these sequence happens, this is what's gonna, that will be the outcome. I think if I could ask, I think Ms. Wright was asking if we could ask the DOE, even if they do turn around, at least in the event that you want to ask the DOE for clarification, that way you have that completed. I would be willing to do that if you would like. I would like to ask the DOE attorney to define that, if that's your question, and then have them turn around and tell us, just like if Ms. Jenkins is correct, that they want to push it back to us, because I've heard both sides of it.
I guess where I'm at is it's great to have it from the DOE. I think the board's capable of making this decision right now, and I think we all should just say, do we want to demand that it be already in the objection process in order for this to uphold, basically? For me, no. This to me is very clear, because all material is subject to an objection. So for me, I think that is getting us in the weeds on the
Yeah,
technicality.
I don't want to
you know
get
what I'm
into
saying?
the fine details. I mean, I'm just going back and looking at, I was thinking that the language came out of the state board rule, but it comes straight out of the statute.
Yeah.
And it does say that is subject to an objection. I don't know what materials we have that aren't subject to an objection
There's
unless
nothing.
it's like, whatever, I don't know, signs in the cafeteria. But yeah, I mean, just plain language, that is what it says. So, and if there's nothing wrong with our policy, because our policy says exactly what the statute says. And I appreciate that, all these things you put in here, except for our Brevard-specific
Unique,
committee.
yes.
So
Yeah, that's a-
I'm good with it the way that it
Yep.
is.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be on the list. All right, anybody else want to speak? Okay. No, she said it, I said it, you said it, that's the thing.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I can reach out to the FAD's attorney just to see what their interpretation is of subject to
Yeah.
objection means it has to be under subjection at the objection at the time, or just anything that could potentially be.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
I
the
can-
way to do that is to ask them that if we moved forward with it not being on the objection list, if there's any kind of like legal recourse from that. If not, then we're willing to just move forward with that.
Right, well, there really is no other language, I mean, this is
Right.
the language straight out of statute.
That's what I
So
mean.
it's really just asking for
Yep.
his or her interpretation of statute. Paul's given his, and I'll reach out to the FAD's attorney. Well, I'll reach out to the DOE, see if they give us any guidance. And if they give us, the guidance says, Mrs. Jenkins suggested, talk to your legal counsel, then we'll know that's their answer.
Yep.
Thank
All right.
you.
I can do that.
So the
Well,
policy.
I can ask in writing.
Right,
They may not respond in
Yeah, I
writing.
don't know if he's going to do that. I know him. I know him. All right. You guys okay? I was just had a
Thank
series
you.
of
So we'll
questions to
keep the
ask.
language of the policy, and then we'll
Yeah, we'll get
get
some
this for
answers.
clarification.
All right. So I have a couple of questions, if
Yes.
that's okay. Page 27, item number 1. Let me move back to it because I was moving through here. Yep, absolutely. It states that the district library media content specialist or designee who shall serve as the non-voting committee chair. So we have a total of, let me just try to get this straight, 6 members on this, 5 school board members, and then 1 of this media content specialist? Or can you kind of give an overview of which other members are on this committee?
Well, there is also new language that speaks to at least one committee member, and this is why it could change the name or change the number. One member must be a parent or legal guardian of students who will have access. So
Right.
if the board selected representatives
5.
meet that, then you have just your 5 plus your content specialists
That you had.
that's facilitating. However, if your board member representatives are not a parent that would have access or be impacted by that material, you could have a situation where we're identifying another member.
And so here's where, is that by law that the designee has to be the voting, the non-voting, the chairperson? Or is that something we put in? And I have a question.
That is just Brevard.
As just Brevard. And the reason for that is, and you just played into the scenario that I was looking at. If you have 2 and 2, or you have 3 and 3 voting to split one, right? So you have 6 committee members. Normally, in a small board, the chair's vote would carry the tiebreaker. But being the fact that the chair isn't a voting member, you could have one split, 3-3, and then what do? So it's not defined in there. So what I would say is does that person have to be the non-voting chairperson, or could our committee vote to have a chair? And then if our committee votes to have a chair, then you have that scenario taken care of. That's what I was looking at when I was reading the policy.
And I think that, when the media content specialist is, and I have the two of them here, is they are working directly with our media specialists and involved in the selection. And so taking them out of that, I think by having a chair, even amongst your committee, or you do see that there is that we can add additional members if need be too.
I think I'm not
right?
concerned, yeah, the committees, but I'm not so concerned about what I'm looking for is a procedural tie that's going to create a situation. And this is something that we may see. It's pretty, you know what I mean? I am okay. I don't know if and I'm not trying to take away the ability of anybody, like this is just about the procedural piece. If I'm a non-voting member driving a committee and being the chairperson, it gets kind of wonky, right? Would we want to entertain having maybe in the event that there's a tie, a chairperson designated, or would you guys like to move to have a chairperson
Mr.
designated?
Susan, I'm not sure where the tie would come because we have 5 representatives from each school board up there are the voting. So
just-
unless somebody's absent.
No, she just laid it out.
No, what she said was if one of the 5 is not a parent, then we might need to make some adjustments. We might need to add somebody on there. In that case, we'd have
becomes
6, but I don't think we're going to run across that problem right now. I would not necessarily want, I guess they could pick amongst themselves, but to allow one of those equal to try to, it's a lot of pressure. And I will tell you, for having watched the meetings, that the non-voting media content specialist chair has done a great job of, and being supported by, she was supported by Dr. Sullivan in the previous meetings, she'll be supported by Ms. Harris. If there needs to be clarification, they've been supported by Mr. Gibbs if necessary as well. So I think we have a good policy as written, and that clarification was just to make sure, because if we had a bunch of elementary school parents that we'd selected to be our members, then we would be having a problem.
So I understand your concern, Ms. Campbell, but if one person doesn't show up and you have 4, or if you have an extra board person there, you're going to have a tie. And
Well,
this is, hang on, Ms.
okay.
Campbell, I listened. And it is not about the content specialists, God bless your soul for even attempting to chair it, right? I'm just trying to figure out when those procedural issues come, instead of having a train wreck at that situation, what can we do to fix it? That's all, since that's a Brevard one, and I'm okay with it. We've worked well together in the past. This isn't anything like that. I'm just trying to figure out, what do you do if there's a tie?
I
And
have
there's
a
no procedure.
suggestion.
Hang on, Ms. Campbell.
Yeah.
So the thing is that I think that in cases, we can either initiate a chair to be put in at that time, then vote for that, or designate somebody that in the event that there's a tie, this is something. Like, I don't know. You have suggestions
Yeah, I have a
now? Go
suggestion.
ahead.
Because we are making, in this round of revisions, we're making the committee, they're giving us a recommendation to the board. My suggestion would be that in the case of somebody's absent and they have a tie and it's 2-2, then we send that information on to the board and the board's making the final decision, and that'll be a tough vote, won't it? But that's my recommendation. Not that we then, because if we then choose
Yeah,
a
I'm okay with that.
chairman, then we're put,
No,
then.
Listen,
Yeah,
that's
kinda
great.
awkward.
If that's the way it works, I think that's a great solution. I'm okay with that, because we're ultimately going to make the decision. Just trying to look at that procedural, so thank you for that. The next one is under H number 2, which I think is number page 28. It speaks to the district advisory committee will receive a copy, and then it says 1 week per 100 pages within the book, the district will utilize book. Are we restricting it, saying that we're going to only stay at that pace, or is this just a suggestion?
This would be a recommendation based on what would be realistic for a person to read within 1 week as part of this committee.
But if the committee wishes to move forward at a faster pace or a slower pace, they're not restricted to this. This is just a mere suggestion, is what you're saying.
It doesn't have the word suggestion on there, so if the board would like, we can
It's just-
amend that. Right now, it would be that you're reading 100 pages every week.
And the reason I ask is that how many books do we have on the list right now?
I understand,
And,
yes.
and so if we're held up at 100 pages, we'll be doing this for 2 years. And so, you know what I mean? I was one of my indicators is that maybe you put suggestion, because I get it. Like, listen, we don't want to work people into the ground.
No, this is
This
all
is
Brevard.
Brevard. So
But then again, like, how are you you have a timeline that everyone's on the same pace for, you know what I'm saying? So if some people are reading 100 pages per week and some people are reading 300 pages per week, you're still gonna have to go at the slowest pace, which is the 100 pages.
I think the way to look at it this way is that you set a date for a committee meeting, and then you have the list of books that you're going to read for that committee meeting. They establish that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the 100 pages needs to be the minimum, maximum, or anything like that. I think that there's some validity to it, but there's also some validity not sitting for 2 years in a situation where we're reviewing books and stuff like that. So if the committee wishes to move forward, I didn't want to restrict them and handcuff them in order to move quicker is all. That's all. That was my
I
thought.
think isn't that what they're doing though? That's why we came up with this number, was so that you can have the date set in advance so that it won't
Right.
go past those dates.
It's set by how long it takes to read a book.
Right.
But I think the solution to that is not to make these people who have full-time jobs and responsibilities, make them read faster. I think the solution is what we put in last fall.
More committees.
Which is number 4 now, that we can call for additional review committees. I know that creates extra work for our media content
my gosh.
specialists, because now they're chairing 2 committees. But if once we get past this first glut of reviews, I'm optimistic that it will slow down at some point. But I would, rather than asking these people to go faster, my suggestion would be that we at least put a second committee in place to move this first group along, and we submit an extra name. I know you're going to have to submit a new name because your person no longer on there, but
Michelle Webb.
yeah,
So it's gonna
we're
be
going
mine.
we need to get a second committee, and that's why the board more than a year ago said, let's add that item in there.
So my concern is still there that even if you have 2, even if you have 3, you're still going to be reviewing
Yeah.
books for a
Mr.
year,
Chair, if I
2
could-
years and continue. Hang on a second. I wanted to follow up and then I'll give it to you. The issue is that I'm not saying that they can't slow down, speed up. I just think that putting an arbitrary number on there and saying you have to wait this amount of time inhibits us from moving quicker if they want to, or moving slower. But you allow the committee to set the dates, to set the times, to set the books that they want to review. That's all. Nobody's telling them you have to read less or more. It's just that's a hard number to stick to. And some people would argue that people can read faster, people can read slower, but you let the committee decide, not being restricted. So, Mr. Trent, you had a question?
Just a few things. So I would like to see a chair voted upon out of the 5, so they can also create an agenda of books. Ms. Campbell, you had mentioned if it's a tie, or if it's 3-2 or 3 and the other 2 didn't read a book at that point, it's a recommendation to the board anyway. The majority consensus has it. It moves to the board and we make those decisions. Because if we have to wait for every board member, they're going to, potentially someone could slow walk an entire year on a book, or eight weeks when it doesn't need to be. I don't believe, I mean, if that
No,
committee
the
says,
committee members don't have a right to slow it down. I mean,
well, if we do the suggestion of 100
right,
pages
if it's a
week.
400-page book that
Minimum of
they've
4
said the
weeks.
meeting's in 4 weeks.
But if 3 out of the 5 say, look, we can go through the Cupcake Bible today, I don't care if anybody's read it, we're putting it on the list and we're moving it to a recommendation to keep it on the shelves. We should be able to do that. We don't need multiple committees, in my opinion, to do that.
I
Because
didn't make it to the formal review.
I know, but I'm just,
I
it's
think-
an example. We
Right.
need to,
If it's
if
super
it is
short-
just a recommendation, if it's a majority, it moves on to the board and we make those decisions.
I truly believe that the 100 pages kind of handcuffs them in the fact that we're going faster, slower, whatever that is. I think that you have a board, they can figure out how. I think that to be honest with you, there's been some concern on both sides that we ban these books or we put them up for review or whatever it is, and then they're out, and then we're not reviewing them quick enough, and then the other side saying you're not doing them quick enough and everything else. And what it comes down to is that The other piece is I've made suggestions, let's just create 5 committees and get them done. And then I've heard from people saying it's difficult for us to get 5 members to step forward and do this because some people have been personally attacked at their businesses and works and everything else. So my thing is that we can't expand the number of committees based upon some of the actions that have been inhibited by other people in the community. It may be difficult for us to handcuff ourselves with 100 pages is all. And I'm not saying you have to do this, you have to do that. I'm just saying that the committee can do that. Ms. Wright, you had something to say?
No, go ahead, they're grabbing their mics.
Can we get just a general sense of how long, I know there's been some fat ones, but generally, we're talking about 300 to 400 page books. Am I hitting the target there?
Most have been
600,
600.
okay.
The 3 that we just did in June 2nd were 3 short poetry books. And those 3, trying to get 3 in one day, took longer than one book took. There were 600 plus pages.
Part of that was because the public comment.
Public comments
which we
was the
just-
Some of them,
huge.
but we have public comments for all of them.
Right.
But we took each book very seriously, and we went through each book individually because we didn't want to make a quick decision on all 3 books. They're written
Right.
by the same author.
Right.
I'm sorry.
The Wizard of Oz has
I'm in my
spoken.
teacher mode here. Is this your mic? So the number of pages is very important too, because if you've paid attention to the meetings, you will see that your committee members come very prepared. They're not just reading the books. They are making notes, they're doing research on the author perhaps, or the topics, or what's being taught in our schools based on our own school policies. So it's not just a matter of reading a book and saying, okay, we're finished, we're ready to meet. So the people you have selected do their due diligence to do their homework in addition to reading those books. These are volunteers who are taking their time at the end of their very busy day to read some of these books they aren't interested in, they don't want to read, but they're doing it for the good of the community, good for our schools. So I think the plan in place is very good. And I agree with Mr. Susan with some books that are shorter, especially if we have an elementary book, we could make some, understanding changes to those types of books. If Dr. Seuss walks in the door and we need to do one of those books, obviously, we would get through some of those books much quicker. But just generally speaking, I think the policy we've had in place has been very, very good and has worked well for the committee members as well. I think if you get feedback from your people, maybe that would help you to make those types of decisions. But we did try to get 3 short books done in one meeting, and it wasn't just public comments. It was just, they really took their time to do the right thing for our students. I'm talking about the committee members.
Where did the 100 pages come from?
Dr. Sullivan did some homework and some research, and then she developed that.
So Dr. Sullivan suggested 100.
Correct, after doing some research, yes.
I guess where I would like to suggest is allowing the committee to determine their path of speed or slow speed. Like that, instead of us saying, hey, you have 100.
But they do, don't they?
Because
I think if you set the date, when Ms. Harris sets the date, that would definitely give them the timeline of how much time they have to do the research to read the book, to have time to think through what they've just read and those types of things. I think the date of the meetings was important.
isn't that set based on the 100-page rule? So if it's 600 pages, we do it in 6 weeks? Is that what I'm hearing?
That was probably the guidance based on this language. So, the sentence before says given adequate time to read. So I think that's how they determined when we
Right.
were scheduling out based on the number of the books.
When I
Or
can tell
number
you
of the pages.
one thing, the meeting that was supposed, we stopped before the June 30th meeting, but there was supposed to be a meeting, the next one was going to be in August. I think they were going to do more than one book because of the boardroom availability, because if they, trying to be in here where they can record easier, right? You guys were going to do 2 books in August because it fit the time frame.
Correct.
So, let's just be honest, one of the reasons why it slowed down is because we stopped it as a board for good
Correct.
reason, but we stopped it. We could have already had another 3, 4, 5 books at this point already gone through the process. I am going to say again, I think we need to get the second committee, the second
That's
committee
all right.
up and running.
We have Ms.
And, and move it along so that we can get going forward. But if you're talking about adding a clause in there that says, because I think 100 pages for people who have full-time jobs is fair. But if you want to put a clause in this area, unless the committee unanimously decides to, shorten the time, whatever, do I have a problem with that? I don't. But I think we're good with 100 pages. That is not what's slowing us down.
May I also, I'm sorry, Mr. Susan, may I go back to the comment about the tie? I will say that the committee tries not to leave well, we didn't leave anything a tie under old policy. We would go back and revisit and continue discussions until there was a unanimous decision. So that never happened in the past, just if that helps clarify that at all.
We had unanimous decisions on books.
She means majority.
I'm sorry, not unanimous.
Majority.
We had, I'm sorry, majority rule. I
Yeah,
apologize.
That's
correct.
And I appreciate everybody saying that, those, it may not, and all that other stuff. What I would say is that if we added Ms. Campbell, not for unanimous, because you can't get that committee to get unanimous, I would say that if the majority wishes to move forward at a quicker pace or a slower pace, that would be one thing. But is there an estimation of how many pages we have total to review?
Oh, no, sir.
How many books are there currently?
48, 52.
And what is the
I have to go back and
And
recount.
what is the average number of pages per book if you had to
I'd
just
say
throw-
average is about 400, but the ones we've been doing have been more than that.
So you got 400 times 40, right? So that's 1,000? So you have 16,000 divided by 365 days.
Mr. Susan, as you're going there, it's been a long time since the board has, or this committee has met. And I
Yes.
know for a fact that there are people on that board, on that committee, that have continued to read. And, they've been reading these books
True, that's
since
true.
they've been on there.
I'm ready. Yes,
So,
sir.
see, exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it's set up, but I would really like to have seen these 5 members select the chair, let the group put together their agenda on how many books that they're ready to get through. We've got 48 books to get through, or somewhere about. Let them set the pace. They're the ones reading. I know my wife can get through 100 pages in, it seems like 60 minutes or less. Let them do that. Yeah, and Ms. Harris, you have enough things to think about and to worry about, but to set an agenda for the next 6 months of books being looked at, I really would like to see this committee take more ownership of it. That's why they put their names in. They want to do this. They want to get through those 48 books. They don't want it spread out over 6 or 8 months. And a suggestion of 100 pages a week can just be a suggestion, but we should not be able to
Mr.
limit.
Susan,
Sir.
a suggestion would be you could leave the 100 pages per week in there and then just comma or at a pace determined by the committee.
That's it.
And then the committee could say, we want to move faster, we want to move
That's it.
slower.
I said a minimum, I would say 100 pages a week.
Right.
A minute. We don't want it to go slower.
I think it's
Right.
wise to set a minimum standard, because honestly, they could do the same thing where
Yeah.
they just
Right.
wait a year to review one book,
Yeah.
because they went at a slower
And I,
pace.
Okay.
I don't think that this, I'm not objecting to you putting that in there, but I don't think that this was having that happen anyway. I am going to push back on the comments that we can't find people to join the committees. There's 600,000 people in Brevard County. You can find one person who wants to join the committee. Quite frankly, there's plenty of them who come to speak here about the things that they don't agree with every single board meeting. Ask one of them to join the committee. It's not going to be that hard for us to find just to start another committee. I think that's important. I don't understand this fixation on a chair member from the committee. I don't understand it. Personally, I just think that the district owns responsibility of making sure that these are going through the process. They're going through the process correctly, and we're keeping eyes on it. It's our responsibility, so there should be a district member who is incorporated in that. And they don't have a vote, so it doesn't impact the vote at all. But I think they should be the ones who are having that conversation and kind of controlling it. And quite frankly, this is the most contentious thing we can possibly talk about with the public. We don't need 5 strangers sitting in a room together arguing with one person who has been voted the chair. That doesn't make any sense. It puts them all in an
I think they
What
can
we need to
get
do then
done,
in order to
I think they can get
form-
done what we're saying we want to get done as far as picking up the pace, which that's what we suggested. And if we're going to make changes today, we have to do it today. Otherwise, we're backing up this process at least 2 weeks. So if we want to add that clause in there, we need to make sure that Ms. Harris has clear. If we're talking about adding a chair, I don't think that the chair is going to give us what we want. If we want the committee to be able to pick up the pace, I think they will be able to do that with the language that we've suggested we adding it without a chair from that. And I'll be quite honest, board, picking a chair is one of the most political things that we do. And I would say that the committee would be very similar. I think they can get the work done and have the flexibility We've already talked about what we would do with the tie, so that kind of eliminates the need for a chair outside of the non-voting chair that's already listed in the committee. So
And I
think-
agree with that as well. As long as they can move forward with anything that evening with a consensus vote, we need to move on. I just don't want to see a chair, nothing but, I don't want any, I would not like to see anything tabled or slow walked or sped up, and the committee not have the ability to change that.
I think
So as long
Ms.
as we can do
I think
that.
Ms. Wright's comment where you set at like 100 minimum or something like that on the standard, along with allowing them to have the flexibility to move on their own, right? So your comma with the committee has the flexibility to move at a faster pace if so
Yeah,
willing.
I'm good
I
with
think
that.
that's good. I think your Ms. Campbell's suggestion, or wherever it came from, where, the chair, you can go 3-3, 2-2, bring it to us. We'll make the final decision. That's totally fine. And the
Well,
reason.
If they go 3-3, we got a problem because there's only 5 members.
Well, if they get if they get the extra member,
Add another
remember, if they get the extra member because there's not a parent that's inside there and we need to identify that,
That's
because
fair.
that's a whole nother issue. Who chooses the parent? And that's a whole nother one.
Mine has children that are in school, so.
So,
It's high school and elementary.
Good.
there's other things that when you look at it from a board governance perspective that, like, I didn't bring it up, but who's going to choose the person that's a parent if they do have it like that? So I think
So that's probably something that needs to be done on the application end of it, to just ask them, do you have children enrolled in school? Actually, it doesn't even say enrolled in school, it just says a parent.
A parent that would have a student with
All right.
access
Yeah.
to the
Oh,
materials.
okay, sorry, the other part of it says a parent when they're objecting, which I'm like, that
Right,
doesn't even say a
correct.
parent of anybody in our school, so, okay, so maybe just to ask that question on the application, or I guess they're not really filling an application
No.
out, but
Because they're appointed,
They're appointed by you.
they're appointed.
so that may be a question when you're having conversation around making your
Yes.
appointments.
Or we maybe need to change our appointees.
Yeah, all right, it's, I
They
mean,
don't
that's.
have to all be.
They don't have
Right,
to.
we
all-
just
Correct.
have, one of them has to be, and I guess there's no way for us to really know that until we hand them off to Ms. Harris, and then she
Correct.
says, uh-oh, we have a problem.
Right.
One of them's not a parent.
Or if we have
No,
two
but-
committees, they just make sure that they
Nope.
shuffle it. around.
And
Okay.
Got it.
Mr. Trent, everything you just said supports exactly why I think it should be a district chair, because then the district is responsible for it not being manipulated, the process.
Yeah, no,
In
I don't
any
know.
direction.
said
I don't think there's
I don't
any
care
for it.
calling them a chair as long as
No,
they
no, I
vote
just
for the
want to
board.
say I agree with you, but
Okay.
that's exactly why I agree with you, because it can't be
We're done with the chair.
manipulated either way.
we're done with the
Recording.
chair. We don't
Okay,
need to talk about the
we
chair.
have clarifying language that's a
Okay,
minimum.
Mr. Susan, thank you.
The minimum of 1 week per 100 pages within the book, or at an increased pace based on the committee determination.
Right.
That's it.
Sounds good.
There was one other part in here that was removed that I wanted just to clarify how we're going to be doing it. Yeah.
Okay. I just had a bunch of other things I was going to go through.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
No, you can go. I mean, if you got one more.
It had to do with the order, because there used to be a phrase in there that had to do with the person who submitted the request being able to pick the order. Which was fine. I know Dr. Sullivan always wanted to make sure that she would ask them, what order do you want? And it was first come, first serve. And if they didn't care, then you guys could order them based on whatever. But I mean, how are we going to determine that moving forward?
At this point, as we're receiving the objections, because I think that, once we get the committee in place, I think we have to go in the order that it is currently in, because we have so many books.
Right.
And then as we start making progress, we're just going to add to the next. To your point, if there are some short books that we can kind of get off the list, we would like that discretion to be able to do that.
Right. No, I
So-
agree. I agree.
Or is there a way to put a caveat in there that if it's a book that's used in curriculum, a lot of AP books, that's been a big thing that they've said, oh, these books are being challenged and we use them in our AP curriculum. Is there a caveat that we can put that supersedes the other books?
We won't need that if they take out the part that they put. Because if they submit a bunch, then, and they're not setting the order, then the staff's setting the order.
No, but I'm saying, I think they
concern is
should
the
be, the order should be as they come in with the caveat, if the book is used in one of our courses, such as AP, that book would be then elevated to the top of the list. Because I hate that those classes are getting messed with based on what's happening here.
Yeah, I appreciate that because it interferes with teacher planning, quite frankly.
It does.
Yeah.
So I would be 100% with that. But if we just, as a suggestion from the chair to the committee, hey, this is why I think this book should go up there, but I truly think the committee should have a consensus, should vote on that. They should be in charge then of any changes. They're the ones that are voting to keep it or not keep it. So if you explain it properly. So,
No, they're-
so we're okay
They're
with the
making a
staff.
recommendation, we are voting.
That's what I mean, to put it, where at on the list. If they want to move it up from 20th to, let's do this now.
I think that's very, okay, so I think you could get yourself in the weeds there, because what happens if it's just, they just want to move this book because they just like this book, and this is the one they challenged, and they want it to go to the top of the list? I think there should be something that's specific
We
tied to
need
the.
3 out of 5 votes to
Well,
do
I
that.
know, but that.
Versus 1.
It could be that way one day. I think that you should have something, that's my personal opinion, it should be tied towards if this is used in curriculum for classes that we currently have, that it supersedes the other ones and it's done first.
And not curriculum, for me, being a former instructor, not curriculum that like I bring this book in and utilize it. It would be like part of the syllabus, part of the
Right,
requirements.
So this is part of a reading list that is
Yes.
part of that course,
Part of,
not
like-
just
and that's-
a novel study that I choose as a teacher
Yep.
for this, but that it's a reading list connected to a course.
Because that goes beyond AP, right? Goes to Cambridge, goes to all of those. You
Yeah.
want to be able to elevate those to be the next level. So that's where I think I would fall in that line. If we were to do it, I think that's a good point to make.
Just for
fine.
clarification, the
That's fine.
committee doesn't talk or meet or do anything
Right.
until we meet for the time to discuss the book. I'm not sure what all sunshine laws are, so Mrs. Harris would be making those decisions. I'm not saying she couldn't ask for input
It
from the
makes it
committee,
easier
but
for you if it's
we don't
defined
talk.
to move like that. That's all.
Yes.
That's fine.
And the good, with the new objection form that we'll get to at 2521, it does, that's where they can dive into some more of that we can make those decisions prior to putting it in order on the list.
Yep.
That's fine.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
All right. With none of that, the next one is K number 1. HIJK, hang on. KL,
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, page 29,
Nine.
K, and then it goes to L, right? Subgroup, it says the school board's decision is final for 5 years, right? Where I would like is sometimes, I didn't know if there's an opportunity to define how it comes back, because if it just says it's for 5 years, all of a sudden we're sitting here and then it pops up again, we didn't know about it. Do we want to put a review of it at that time after the 5 years and say this is something we would not want to continue, or do we want to just let it go for 5 years? Do you see what I mean? Like all of
Again,
a
is
sudden
that
it's
a-
5 years.
If
comes
the,
back.
if the language were to not change, so in 5 years, part of that, the steps media specialists take in creating their collection is to ensure that it aligns with the language of the statute. So again, it's not pornographic, it's age appropriate, all of that. So that would be the same criteria getting it out of our collections. And so then when the media specialist would be, entertaining purchasing it for his or her school library and working with the principal on that process, that same language, pending no new statutory language were to come out in 5 years, that would be the same criteria they'd have to review in order to bring it back into the collection, if I'm making sense. So
Yeah.
whatever criteria was determined that it was not in compliance with, that got it out of our collections, would be the same review process a media specialist would need to take in order to bring it back in, be it in 5 years, 7 years, whenever. That would be the same language. So if it were determined to be pornographic, it would be, reviewed, looking at all 4 of those pieces, again, bringing it back into the collection.
Could we put and this is my question, could we just put it on an informational agenda item that these books are now past, you know what I mean? Just to notify the board. We don't have to vote on it, doesn't have to be a process. My concern is that there's going to be a series of opportunities for these books to come back. I would just like to know that the
You
opportunity.
mean like a
There-
do not buy list right now?
Like,
after
so,
they're
so
out?
say these 30 books or whatever, there's situations where they're no longer allowed to be inside of our schools. 5 years from now, these 30 books, technically, under definitions that may be different or whatever, are going to be available to come back on. And there may be some that our committee felt these broke that level, but the committees there don't, and there's all that stuff. Just letting the board know. Is there something?
They're published online.
We
aren't
do
they?
have to, I mean, we put them on our website, but also we have to submit that information to the DOE, and then they track those
Yeah,
books
I
too,
have
for
all
that
those.
reason.
Okay, so we're okay. We got some sort of catch on the back end.
Yeah.
We have, it
Was-
seems we
And
have
to your
several
point,
catches.
I remember when we went through this a year ago, I asked specifically for us to make sure that we're tagging those in our system, any books, so that media specialists are aware, you know, that, hey,
Yeah.
that there was objection to this or whatever, so that they're looking at it, there's something, a red flag of some sort that
Especially
Cause them
because the committee members making that recommendation may say this is appropriate for 11th grade, 11th and 12th grade. So that recommendation would be then noted in there. If it's, you know, once the district makes that recommendation and the board were to vote, it could be that it's not appropriate for this group. And like thinking of an elementary, K-6, you have a wide range of students. So the committee recommendation that you guys end up voting could be, this book is appropriate only for 5th and 6th graders or 5th grade on up. And so then it would be coded as appropriate that way.
So just a question, in the last write-up of this, I believe it said 8 years. Is there any?
That's what I remember.
Is there any years, is this, again, is this a state thing or is this a Brevard thing?
This is a Bavard thing.
So if it's deemed to be out of here, I mean, why are we putting a year there at all?
What was
What's the rationale
reduction
behind putting
reason?
any years, waiting for us to be out of here? I mean, I'm just saying.
It is true.
But why?
That's the 4-year term.
I think because we had a committee of people, new and old, to the team, really working through this, we were looking at, you know, at the rate that things are interpreted to be suitable for 4th grade, what was once suitable is not suitable. I think that was just an arbitrary time to review that book should it want to come in. Of course, the board can, you know, modify that to what you wish.
Right.
Oh. We're good at 5? You good at 5, Ms. Campbell, Ms. Jenkins? You guys okay?
Yeah, I'm
Alright.
fine with it because, again, it doesn't just come back. It would have to go through the process again. And the why there has to be a time frame on it is because you can't have a permanent ban on it if the people are going to constantly change. The board members who are elected by the people of this county change, then the representative of those board members change. But again, it has to go through that process again. So if it is something that is blatantly absurd, it's not going to make it through that. I mean, hopefully it won't make it through the committee.
Well, if you didn't have a time frame, you could bring it back next year and go through the process. If you thought it was removed unjustly.
Well-
Now you have, what, 5 years?
What do you mean?
He's reversing the theory. Go ahead.
Right, so
Explain it.
if things change
Right,
and
but,
somebody.
so the reason the board had made that decision in the past, which I argued against the 8 because it seemed absurdly long, but the reason that they put it on there is because it will be impossible for our staff and for these committees to function if they're just coming willy-nilly in and out. And the reality of a year later, that opinion changing, it's probably not going to. That your members of your board aren't going to change, your appointees aren't going to change. So it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if we're going to change the number, I think it should be a 4 or an 8, right? Like, that makes sense because the board and the committee members might change, but leaving it wide open seems messy.
I think 5's good because it's after
Yeah.
the 4-year term, whatever.
Okay, I was just wondering the
we're all okay
rationale
there?
behind it.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is letter N, parents shall have the right to read messages from any material that's subject. If the board denies a parent, can we walk through how a board would deny a parent from speaking at the podium? Or could we make that the board chair? Does that make sense to you? Is there my thing is it's just clarification because what it's saying is the board, which would, in my mind, take a majority of a board in order to do that. Like if you're speaking,
Right.
the board denies a parent the right. It's difficult for the board who has no control over the public speaking to say that. I would say the board chair.
That's
all.
the statutory language again.
But
Personally, I think it's probably better to keep it the board. I mean, and maybe the right process is, hey, parent, pause. I feel like this is an appropriate board, take a vote right now. Continue reading or not. That way it doesn't fall just solely, like right now you're the chair, but I mean, could it, whoever,
yeah.
it could fall solely on one
then
person.
I would
I know that's.
die.
That's
would
why
die to
that's
go-
why I made that argument last time. It didn't make sense.
I would die to go into voting and then the debate that would occur to vote on a person while they're standing there. Like, I have
Mr.
no
Gibbs,
problem saying the
did you
chair.
say in many,
Looking at it.
in many things written, when they said the board, they were actually talking about the chair? Did I hear that in the last meeting or no?
Well, what we talked about was.
Did you ask Gibbs, or did you ask Ms. Campbell?
Mr. Gibbs.
Mr. Gibbs?
What did I'm not understanding what you're asking.
Well, the language where it says if the board finds,
Right.
I vaguely remember you saying something that many times it's written, when they say the board, they're actually referencing the chair of the board.
The chair runs the meeting, so
Right.
the chair generally stops somebody.
Okay.
I could envision a situation where somebody else says, you need to stop. And
Right.
if the board chair doesn't speak up and say, wait, I didn't stop them, they can continue reading
Correct.
and they let them
Should
keep
be the
reading.
board chair.
That person may walk away thinking that the board stopped them.
All right, that's easy enough. All right, those are the only changes that I had. Sorry, Ms. Harris, if you go through them, I just waited my turn. Does anybody else wish to say anything else? No? Okay. On to the next one, Board Policy 2521, Instructional Materials Program. Ms. Harris, would you like to introduce it?
Yes, so we have instructional materials program that you have seen recently, and I believe in April was the last time it was reviewed. Again, quite a bit of overlap, so we're thinking around clarifying of classroom libraries. You'll also find language, if you look on page 2, and you will see it says on or before July 1. One of the big highlights here would be that the superintendent would certify. So we have a document filled out based on the estimation or estimated allocation. The reason that is important is this will be the first year that the state is providing districts the textbook or instructional materials funding in that lump sum. It's not a categorical anymore. And so that is just a process put in place so that money is earmarked for instructional materials. So that is in this revised policy. The additional documentation that we'll provide to the DOE, the superintendent will sign stating that when we purchase instructional materials, what is new to this language is that we'll also provide professional learning that is specific to the encoding and decoding that's involved in the science of reading. So that is new language that is in here just to specify that change, that we're going to buy instructional materials, but we're also going to provide professional learning around how they incorporate that science of reading in those materials. Again, the big change of this, because you'll see a lot of foundational reading skills anytime we're purchasing instructional materials, that we're being very clear that those materials align to the science of reading, with the big piece of that we're no longer using pictures to help students encode the meaning, that we're using phonics in that reading foundation. Pictures can be used then, and this is all in here, but the pictures would be used to help students make meaning, but not to decode the word. And then when you get past that integration of that new language around, you speak to then the objection process. So we have gone through that with 2520. So am I to understand that your wish to anything that was revised in 2520 with that clarification of language, that we can replicate that in these exact procedures that we would follow for 2521. The form you will see that is also part of 2521, that is our objection form. And so that is the form that will be used by parents or residents to object to either books, video material, or other instructional material. Mr. Gibbs mentioned this earlier, so something I just want to talk through around this policy is just some added information that I'm thinking based on feedback we are getting from the state as we roll out the objection process. On our objection form for 2521, it's called the Objection to Instructional Materials form. I would like to add, with your permission, to the top, the directions for this process.
Yeah.
So we will be putting that on our website. Schools will have it on their website, but I'd like it also on the form. Also, with feedback from the state since posting this, is just the addition of adding language around the school or schools where the instructional material has been found by the objector, as well as the grade level. The other information, and then again, this is just all suggestions, is you will see that I believe, I don't know if it's on your form that was uploaded, but there is an error in my email address. So I will correct that on the form if that is incorrect, so that it gets to me.
Oh, Tara Harry.
Yes,
There's a couple of those throughout the policies.
yes.
Thank you. Anybody wish to, so do you need board consensus? I think we all were shaking our head yes on the instructional piece of the application. I'm okay with that. Are you guys okay with that? I think we've got a board. Okay, so you need that. Do you need anything prior to us having this discussion besides that for direction?
I do not.
Okay, is there anybody wishes to speak to this policy? Okay, hearing none. I think we're in a good spot. Thank you, Ms. Harris. I understand this was a lot of work, and I want to
Yes.
congratulate you on the success.
Thank you.
I think we have a good
My
policy.
pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Rendell. All right, the last topic is discussion, review, document draft 1, designate dates, times, and locations of school board meetings for meeting dates for 2024. You guys, there's been a little bit of discussion back and forth.
It is so cold in here right now.
The,
Oh, no, that's the second page of yours. I got,
you got your second page?
yeah, it's 2
Okay.
pages.
Just wanted to kind of look them over, make sure that you guys don't have somewhere that you're concerned about, and, start there. So does anybody have any comments, questions, or anything else on this?
I did.
Go ahead.
I think in March, we need to make an adjustment because we don't have a meeting over spring break.
Right.
That's one of the few chances that our ESF staff can
Yep.
take off, even though they frequently don't. My suggestion would be for March that we go down to just having, unless Dr. Rendell feels like we can't do without 2 meetings, that we go down to just 1 meeting, either have it on March 12th or have it in the middle of the month at March 19th.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Campbell. One of the reasons we wanted to bring the calendar to you to look at now is so if we want to make any changes, we can do it before the organizational meeting
Yeah.
in November. And so one of the first dates we looked at was the March 26th date. Yeah, it is during spring break, and I would want to give staff the opportunity to
Yeah.
go somewhere on vacation if they wanted to. So my suggestion would be to go to 1 meeting and probably do it March 19th.
Okay.
That way, it's in the middle of the meeting. If we have some projects, Ms. Hand's always really good at making sure we stay on schedule with projects, and
Yep.
so that we don't go so far between March 12th and April 9th.
Yeah.
If we went March 19th, that would be a good.
I'm good on that. You guys okay with that?
Yeah. I'm fine with
Ms.
that.
Campbell?
Yep.
Ms. Jenkins, are you okay with that? Okay.
And then I had one other.
Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
In September, we have the September 5th, which is one of those odd ones that we have to do because we have to do the budget hearing before
Right.
whatever the deadline is, the timeline. In keeping our, we have in our union contract that we will try to, we have the principles to not ask them not to schedule things like open house or school, things that
Mine
teachers
does
are
it every
required to go to on board meeting nights.
Yep.
And that those are going to be the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. So generally, we try to keep them off. So my suggestion is just September, because the 5th and the 12th, the 17th, I'm sorry, the 5th and 17th. The 17th is not the 4th Thursday. It's the 3rd. And plus that leaves only 12 days between those meetings. We just put the September 17th meeting on the 24th instead of on the 17th, just to space them out a little bit more and keep it on that 4th
You guys
Tuesday
okay
if
with
we
that?
can.
I'm okay with that.
Unless there's a good reason to not. I did not look at the major holidays and see if we had any major holidays to deal with.
I do not believe it is a major holiday or anything. I think it was just they were trying to stay on schedule.
Gotcha.
Ms. Jenkins, you okay with that? Okay. I think those are good. Does anybody else care to wish to discuss any of this?
Well, you had mentioned months ago, actually it was in the summer, we're possibly working around the summer.
Yeah.
So you want to
Where's-
pick up where you,
Yeah, just so you guys know, the county does it and some of the other areas do it, where they get a break in the middle of the summer so everybody can take a longer time, right? What I had suggested is that we create a break inside of the summer where instead of having to come every 2 weeks, we either get rid of one of them or spread it out so that you can have 3 weeks to a month in between there. Now, I think the county commission does a 3 week or a month. I think it's a month that they take off, right? But it would give us an opportunity to be with our families, to move in between there and everything else. So if you take a look at this, you have June 11th, June 25th, July 9th, July 25th. we could move that 9th up, you could move that 25th back. There's just a couple of opportunities. I don't know if you guys want to check with your significant others and find out if there's something there, or I'm okay, but I would like to create a break in between there of a larger amount of time rather than coming every 2 weeks.
Right.
Because it's not just the 2 weeks, just so the public understands, you're not just showing up. The board chair comes in and working with, you know what I mean, agendas and all that stuff. You have all of the topics that are coming up. You have to jump on moving with, each one of the assistant superintendents. There's some stuff there. So I would like to do that.
I'm not opposed to doing that. The only thing I would say is that I know during the summer, we have a lot of construction projects,
Yep.
and Sue
Right.
relies on us to be here to approve some of the construction cost and things that are happening there. So if we could maybe work in conjunction with her to make
Yes.
sure that we don't put her at a spot where she's delayed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what I would suggest, because I think we consensusly think that this is something we would like to do, but I do agree with you that we need to make sure with our, because I think Ms. Hand's projects are quoted and everything ahead of time, but if you can check with staff, because it's not only that, it's student accommodation plans, there's a bunch of stuff in there that require dates. If you could check that, knowing we want to block it out and then go there, that would be the best way to do it for me.
Ms. Campbell has something.
Yeah, just the only regulation, which I don't know if they have across the street, is we do have to have one meeting per month.
Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I would not have a problem if we can shift those first 3 summer meetings, which are our morning meetings, to having 2 of those instead of 3 of those, however it might look.
June 25th, that's the one I'm voting to.
Yeah, the only thing is, like usually that first week of July, the week that 4th of July falls in,
Yeah.
a lot of our schools are closed because that's, so we wouldn't want to go to like the July 9th, but, and we can't move July 25th.
You can't
'Cause
what?
we can't move
Tentative
July
budget,
25th
tentative
because that's the
Oh,
tentative
no,
budget
July,
hearing.
sorry, I was
That's
thinking
the
June 25th
weird
is what I
Thursday
was-
meeting.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be to look at the July 9th date to see if that could be eliminated.
Yeah.
If you can check with staff.
Yep.
Get back to us. Does anybody else wish to have it? He's going to check with staff on the
Yeah.
July 9th
No,
date.
that's good.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, Mr. Trent. Anybody else wish to discuss anything else? Okay.
No?
All right. I think we're okay. Ms. Jenkins, you okay? All right. Any board member have anything further to discuss? Hearing none. Dr. Rendell, do you have anything?
No, sir, I'm good.
Meeting is adjourned.